or workflow and ask for questions, but feel free to chime in as well. Okay, great, there we go. So real quick, I've just got about 5 slides and not a big slide yet. The bulk of this will be on the demo, and if we have general questions around security or deployment or approach, we can definitely come back later on and look at more slides or more information as needed. But just to sort of set the stage real quick for us, and try to talk to both of you guys at the same time here. So real quick, excuse me, when I sort of look at the public sector problems, most of them I can sort of tie back to, oh, there we go. Most of them I can sort of tie back to this gap, if you will, right? Where we've got infinite devices and data and demands and constituents and customers, but we've only got finite time and attention and resources and tools. So our sort of main goal at the macro level is how do we start bridging that? So sort of coming down to what we can actually tackle today, and we've heard a lot about the individual requirements from the different teams, neighborhoods, special events, SPOC, and looking at the different requirements. And we'll definitely talk about that, but at a very high level, sort of distilling those are these bullet points here. And I'll have to remember to pause a bit for that. But something from automating this, right from intake. How do we start to do automatic collection of the applications of these different things? How do we start collaborating right from the get-go? How do we start to do automatic workflows and share that process if it's going to be worked on by multiple teams? We can integrate things like the calendars. How do we allocate officers? How do we get all of that in one place so that we've got that one single source of truth, right? We want that one pane of glass. And actually, it's very educational what you walked through earlier today, Pablo, because yeah, man, there's a lot of moving pieces, and it's going to be imperative to get that in one place, like you're envisioning. So, sort of how we're approaching that is, on the left-hand side, I'd say that's pretty accurate about what the current, reality is, right? Where we've got a multitude of intake channels. I mean, just the artifacts, looking on the site, you've got your main events application, then you've got your over 1,000 attendees, then you've got maybe fire plans, alcohol plans, all of that stuff. And that's just from an artifact perspective. And then from communications, you've got emails, phone calls, post-it notes, letters. So how does that all start to get tied together? And that's what we're going to start looking at in something like Dynamics is let's get that, right? You can think of it almost as sort of that unified database where we can start putting all of this information in. We can start to pull that out in reporting and views, get those visuals. Let's have these things automatically create the templates for us so that we've got our situation plans or our event plans built out so that we don't have to do this manually. Let's let it do the mundane things like sending emails or notifying people of status changes. Let's not have to do that manually. So getting into that is sort of, well, where does Dynamics fit, right? Frankly, for you guys today, you guys are all very familiar with Office, and of course, we also make Office, so that's great because then these two things are very tied together. I mean, when we talk about sort of looking at the key things in the cloud, the two that we focus on right now, productivity, business apps, that's exactly where it sits, right? We're talking about Office and we're talking about Dynamics. So as we'll see in the demo today, use the things that you know. I mean, if you are, responsible for a permit or an application or 50 or 60 of those, you can use Outlook as that window. You don't have to log into Dynamics. You can access it right from Outlook. If you're used to Excel, you can bulk edit the records in Dynamics using Excel. Use the things that you already know, that you like, that you're familiar with, unless you don't like Outlook or Excel. But have the ability to use that and leverage that. So because it's in the same family, we have that power, that flow that's very seamless across these things. Getting into sort of, similarly along with that is from an environment perspective in terms of your computer or your browsers, same story, right? Use the browsers that you already use right now. It doesn't have to be IE. It could be Chrome, Firefox, Safari, any of that. From mobility, and if you guys are in the room at least curious, I brought my iPad today, and it's the same ability, whether I'm on a desktop, I'm on a Surface, I'm on a tablet or a phone, we can get the same information in that same seamless manner. And so this is where we want to meet our customers where they work. And from that sort of people, process, tools perspective, we want to cover all three, right? If we just come in here and just give you a tool, it's going to fail. We've got to focus on the people, the process, and the tool, and that's why we've got all of these elements in here. So my last slide is sort of to set the stage for, all right, you've heard the name Dynamics CRM, and I'm not sure how many of you guys have seen or even heard about it before, but CRM stands for Customer Relationship Management. for us, a lot of times, and for a lot of our customers in public sector, state and local government, customer doesn't necessarily always apply, right, which is fine. That's why we see this indication of XRM, where we can start to replace that customer, that C, with a lot of other things. It could be C like constituent management, city council management, legislature management, but it could also be data management, events management, permit management. So this is where we can start to take Dynamics, take that core, and start to extend it out, like we have today that we'll show you in the demo, right? And what that means is basically Dynamics, if you will, has these core features that are shared that we can leverage across anything that we want. This is stuff that you don't have to build. It's already built for you, right? Dashboards, mobile, workflow. And so using these core things, whatever we're doing, whether it's permitting or licensing, we can leverage these core features and sort of have that unified platform, right? And so when we talk about, and this is the most technical I will get today, but when we talk about sort of what it takes to stand this up, the majority of this is configuration. And that means wizard driven. So, we're talking click a button, drag and drop forms, type in some labels. Only 10% on average needs to be customization, only 10% integration. This is what we were talking about earlier, right, Pablo? And this is sort of where that quick time to value is, because the vast majority of what we can do can be configured. And if we need to, sure, we can pull in custom code, we can pull in integration, but most of it we can do via configuration. So something to note is that this particular demo that Katie and I built, it was entirely done via import and configuration. There's no custom code, there's no custom integrations. But you can see that within the matter of a few hours, we can start to mimic, and I'll let you see for yourself, we can start to mimic that process, put it in place, have the automatic workflows, have all of this stuff kick off and be there. So that's my slides for, when I first joined Microsoft, I was told that they love slides, so I'm going to be the rebel. I hate slides here. So sort of as we get into the demo, let me pause there real fast actually, but any questions just generally on that room on the phone? No? Okay, great. So as we get into it, the process that we'll look at is, I think we'll go ahead and go from the portals to look at that, how we first submit the event application from the perspective of the organization or the citizen who's submitting the application. We can look at the portal, how we start to capture that, and then we'll follow that application through the process. What happens when it, in my fake workflow, what happens when it hits the events team? What happens when it hits the police team? Then let's go ahead and drop up and see, how do we get the information at a higher level? Reporting, dashboards, right? How do we get that summed up? So let's go ahead and follow that workflow through. And I'll load up here. Sure, already loaded. This is sort of our mock-up of the portal for this particular demo. So special events office, right? You can start to have on the portal a couple of different pieces. One key thing is when we talk about the portal, sort of that web integration, and I think if the neighborhoods folks are going to watch this later, but one of the key things from them was that sort of web presence, that web form integration. And so something about the portals is when we talk about having CRM and we have sort of a public-facing portal like this, it's part and parcel. It's the same thing, right? When we sort of have a portal like this, if we make a change in CRM, let's say we're collecting the address of the special event, if we decide that we need to collect 2 lines of address versus 1, we make that change in CRM, we can have it automatically propagate here. We do not have to maintain a separate layer or have a separate team build these websites for us. That's part and parcel of dynamic CRM. So we can have that automatic sort of mesh, so that we don't have to do it all manually. So a couple of the elements that we see on here on the form, for example, you can immediately see we can have things like RSS feeds or information or social engagement here. But for us, what I'm going to go ahead and do is first go ahead and log in. And this is also an example where, depending on what you want, some of these forms could be anonymous, right? If it's just a simple information request form, you probably don't need them to log in. But if it's for an event, a lot of our customers want them to log in so that they can accurately track these folks, these organizations. They log in and they can always see the status of their permits. Or if they're a serial submitter, right, they can see all 20 that they've submitted. So that's where you have that option. But this is where you can start to make this relevant to what you guys are needing. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in here. And you'll have to excuse hotspot. This is we'll go ahead and go with that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And I'm going to go ahead and sign in as a customer. and it'll be pretty fast here, my super secret password. And so what we'll see is, if I'm signed in as a customer, there's a couple of things, right? First is that benefit that I was talking to you about. If this is a portal where you require sign-in or for certain types of permits, well, I, as the customer, can start to get that status immediately. No more phoning in. Of course, I can still phone in, but this is a great place to get that. And I can see the status of all my permits. I can see the status of all of my applications. And this way, I can keep track of these different things without necessarily having to put that burden, put that overhead on the special events team or the contacts. What I can also do is go ahead and go through and let's submit a permit here. So what we have here is a few different examples. For us, we're going to be doing the special event permit for today. Right? So what we did was we took the top portion of the special events application that you guys have on the site, and we replicated it into the web form here so that we can start to see how that might fit in. Now, one thing as we go through this and CRM later on, again, keep in mind, this is completely configurable. So these forms, where the fields are, what they say, is all up to us, and we can change that pretty easily. We just took what was on the application as it's currently living and replicated that to here. So of course, we're going to collect some basic information. How's that? We'll go ahead and put a team party in there. I'm going to put in a live address. I know that actually I've got one to say 1111 3rd Avenue, 98101. That's correct. And we'll say this is a block party. So for us, we can of course start collecting the details, just like you do today. What's the address? What's the description? What's the event details, right? We can do fields like this where it's very simple, just a type and collection of data. We can also start to collect some different kinds of data in different ways. So as it goes to the next page here, the next section on your guys' application was around collecting the event dates, right? I want the section to tell me what days are my events and when is the setup and takedown. So for example, we can quickly come in here and say, all right, for this particular day, let's do next week, 22nd, and it's going to end on the 22nd, maybe an hour later. All right, how's that? So it's going to go from 11 a.m. to 12 a.m. And this is something too, right now your guys' form has the day of the week. You can start using CRM to do simple things like if I plug in the date, it's going to know the day of the week. So you don't have to have them submit that. But we can go ahead and plug in the participants. A ratio of 25 to 5, sounds about right. So this is where we can start to collect these different kinds of data, right? Now we can start building out the different kinds of dates here. And I'm going to quickly plug in the event setup and takedown. You know what, I'll make it easy. I'll say 22nd, 23rd. And here you can see we can also start to capture information like attaching the maps, like you have today. So these different kinds of data, just like you're collecting today, but we're having a web form unify that, right? Instead of having to fill out an application where you have to manually transpose it, you have to manually capture all these different artifacts. Let's go ahead and have the system capture that. Let's make sure that before they submit it, these different things are on there. So for me, I'll go ahead and put a picture of myself. That's what I had handy. I'll put a picture of myself up there, and we'll go ahead and see that go through. So as it goes through the process, we've collected some of the basic information. The next step for us is to go ahead and collect some applicant information. Right now, again, if this is anonymous, it can fill it in. If they're logged in as the portal, it can already auto-populate that information for them. Going through some of this, the next step we can sort of skip as well. But this is basically, again, we can start to build out this form so that we can collect and section off these different details. Right, all this stuff you're collecting today. Fireworks, staging, scaffolding, amplified sound, etc. The sort of last step that we have here is some more concepts around the web form. If we have, through this form, if we have selected certain things like this is something over 1,000 people, or this is alcohol is going to be distributed, well, we can start to account for the differing things like how much money is it going to cost me. Maybe the base fee is 100, but as I submit different things, it's going to automatically help me calculate that, right? So from this perspective, I think we don't need to put too much focus here, but it has the ability to start accounting for that up front so that you don't have to worry about the billing later on. You could just charge them for the fees up front. So the web form is sort of that central location where we can start to, for the customers, put all the required information in one place. They can always refer back to it, get the status, update the information, and not have to do all this multitude of outreach, emails, phones, etc. So let me pause right there real fast. Is from the portal perspective, any questions?
Is there a way, if they were getting fireworks, if they were serving alcohol, if they were serving food, that would automatically prompt them to submit those applications, and then that goes to the different departments that...
Yep, definitely. Yeah, so for something like that, probably set up conditional, right? If you check fireworks, then yeah, let's open up a little dialogue to collect that particular artifact. And then once we run the workflow, like we'll see in CRM, right, we can notify the different folks, here's your artifact, here's your artifact. And then of course they can all see the record and see it, exactly. Yep.
So that can trigger, and on the first page, show licenses and permits has options.
Yes,
so
and this one's safe. Let's go back there. Yep.
Special events permit is a collection of permits. So if you check those boxes, that both activates the CRM notification in the background and can redirect them or open a second portal for, say, a vendor license they fill out, that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that could be integrated. I'm thinking all the departments where, DON and licensing and all that.
Yeah, we go through, we want to go through your requirements process and then, understand what requests require which permits and licenses. And then you can put the conditional logic within the system to require when a specific event permit is requested.
Okay.
You can make those associations.
So if there are licenses or extra permits that are specific to their permissions of a special event permit, in theory, we could build those under the CRM, have that department to use the same process, and it's just kind of a web that spreads out.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits of the platform is this could be shared across all those 24 organizations plus that are a participant in the permit process, so they could see the status of things at any point in the process.
And to that point is, for example, these are a couple of live examples. This one's Hillsborough County in Florida. You can start to see, right, they're capturing a lot of different types. These are not going to the same team, and some of them have workflow behind it. So yeah, like you said, as you have these different requests, like animal requests, I submit that, you might chain me to another one if applicable. Exactly. So, and this is sort of a quick example since we're here of, this is the portal, right? We want this to be very easy to use, so you can skin it, you can collect the information, but most importantly, it's a single source where people can start submitting all these different things. You don't have to maintain this whole separate website or repository of websites, if you will. Let's go ahead and unify that information here. So this is Hillsborough. This is business oversight, the department in California here. Same thing, right? They have FAQs. They've got searches here. They can register. They can look at filings. So this is also where you can start to publish out different things like public versus private. You might have private permit events for these folks, but then you might want to publish out certain filings. You get a lot of information requests. The common ones, you might post it so that people can simply pull them from here, not necessarily have to contact you for each one. But these are just some of the things that the portal can start to allow you guys to quickly do. So,
and one of the other nice things just to add in about this, the portal that we're showing today is that it's HTML5, it's responsive design, so you don't have to have a separate mobile component. It will resize based on the device from which you're accessing it from.
Even if you're on the CRM backend, let's say I'm in King County and I don't have any proprietary access, you can access it from your laptop.
Yeah.
Ask a
and it's browser agnostic, so it supports whatever device. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the special events process is one leg of this, and then the police plan a lot of events that are not special event related. Sure. It could be dignitary protection, it could be a request that comes into our SWAT team or to our harbor.
Yep.
And so I'm guessing the answer is going to be yes, but the ability to branch off and have a kind of a police-centric portal where we can add stuff that stays in our house, so to speak.
Right. You can do it through the portal. You can do it just in CRM because the portal piece sometimes, internally, you might not decide to use it, right? If you just want to expose this to customers. But correct, when we talk about CRM, this is where special events, is maybe, just guessing, 1/10 what the police department has to take on overall. So this is just going to be one of those streams. You've got your whole other 9/10, like you said, all your other stuff coming in from all these other sources. Exactly. So, for the next step is actually getting out of the portal and going into CRM and looking at that overall picture. But again, just before I go on, any other questions on the portal? And again, we can always come back too, but on the phone, any Sam and I saw some other folks, but
A quick question about the payment portion of the portal. Like I said earlier, we've been working for a little bit with another third-party vendor for our film permit online application process. And one of the IT hiccups was a payment portal and making sure that that fits within the city's definition. We have one vendor, I believe. Tim, I don't know, do you know anything about that? Do you have any information on how that works, or this does align with that? Or is that more of a kind of a back-end question?
So I don't know what the city's payment portal is. We'll look into that specific process. The CRM itself is PCI compliant, so it should be able to integrate with that system, but we'll take that as an action item and just confirm that.
I think that's the number one question, if it's PCI compliant, and then there's a vendor that.
Slide. Stacy's in the
I'll let her in.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and say, so what we've done here is gone ahead and submitted that particular event permit. So what that does is, of course, that can start a lot of different things, right? If there's multiple teams that need to be notified all at once, that's where the workflow can start to kick in. So what we can start looking at right now is, let's get out of the portal, let's go into Dynamics and start looking at that from behind the scenes, if you will, right? If we're managing these things, or if we're trying to look at the dashboards, what does that look like? So real quick for us, I'm going to switch over to Dynamics. This is Dynamics CRM. For those of you guys who have not seen this before, I was going to say it's tiny. For those of you guys who have not seen this before, real quick primer is, first and foremost, everything here is driven from roles and security base, right? I'm in here for the purposes of the demo as an admin, because we want to see everything. And we can log in later on as a police person or events person. But this is where we can quickly say, what is my role? If I'm police, maybe all I care about are the events that I've been assigned to, right? If I'm an officer, show me only the events that I'm allocated to. This is where we can quickly scale this down or up to say, show me the information that I care about so that I can do my job. And for other folks like executives or for managers or just for information, right, we can look at that full picture if we need to. So with that said, sort of the navigation real quick is you can think of it sort of in two layers. The top layer is sort of our top level navigation, almost like tabs in browsers. We can click this hamburger menu. I don't know what the real name is, but this hamburger menu that allows us to access these different tiles to say events and permitting, outreach and marketing. And within these tiles, we can quickly access different things like our special events permits, right? So navigationally, we want to make it very simple, all right? You can go ahead and go to the tiles, go to your permits, navigate from there, in a nutshell, right? Down below, excuse me, down below here, that's where the data is returned. Of course, right now we're showing a dashboard, so we've got maps and funnel graphs and charts. If we're looking at a record, we're going to see the information from the record. So again, navigationally, we want to keep it very simple there, and you can easily navigate around. Let's go ahead and for us, let's dig into that permit that we just did. So what I'm going to go ahead and go into is look at our special event permits, and I'm going to be able to see a list of the permits that we have. Right now, because it's by permit number, well, if we go to the very bottom, here is that block party that we just submitted here. And so what we start to look at is, these are the different views that we have into the data. And again, because this is Dynamics, we have the ability to dictate what we want to see. Here, I'm just saying, pull me sort of a list of all of my permits that I have, along with all the data, like the address, the city, latitude, the longitude, the organization name, all that stuff. We can quickly create these different views to say, what do I care about seeing, right? So for us, and we'll come back to that point in a second here, but what I want to do is go ahead and go into this permit and look at this particular record itself. So what we can see are a couple of key things. First, navigationally again, is across the top, when it loads here, when we talk about workflow, I mean, the first question I have when we have workflow is, where are we in the workflow, right? So this little bar, the orange and gray bar, this is going to be the workflow that we put in for this particular demo. And excuse my ignorance, but right now I've got a very simple sort of first events team pass and then a police team pass to sort of mimic the different teams here. But this is where we can start to build that very quickly to say, what are the processes, right? If there's 20 teams involved, all right, we can build this workflow to account for all of them. And that way we know exactly where this is in the status, in the state. We can see, what information we need for that particular stage, and we can get that information immediately. So we can see the stage. This is that workflow. Down below, here's the information, right? So some of this information, of course, is directly from the form. What's the event name? Some of this is derived by the system. I'm going to assign it a unique permit number. Some of it is set by rules. I have a rule here to say, when a record is created, assign it first to an events person, because they have to do the first pass, right? So we can start to see that information populate these forms. And we can see that information in line right here. The event dates, the event setup, the event takedown, etc. Now, one of the things is, all right, on this particular record, this is pretty new, but we already wanted some workflow to kick off. As soon as somebody submitted this application, we wanted an email to go out to them to say, let's notify them, say that we got your application, right, so that they can have that peace of mind. So again, where we can start to set up
a phone call.
Where we can start to set up things like this email. As soon as I created the case, this particular generic email would have been sent out, and we can go ahead and look at it, saying, dear portal customer, or whatever the name would be, right? We've received your application, we're working on it. This is, just a quick example of one of those things where if there's automated stuff like we were talking about, have the system do it, right? We can set it up so that it does it on case create, on status change, on information change. Any of those can be triggers where we can have the system start to push that out and save that overhead. So for us, we saw the email here. Of course, there's all the other different things. And I know that the neighborhoods folks had one requirement, particularly around, of course, email tracking, but also things like phone call tracking or task tracking, right? This is where we can start to bring that together. So I can look at the different activities. I can look at the different things that I've done. And if we need to see, for example, documents, right? Here's that document I submitted from the portal, and we can see all of that in one place. So we're starting to see that picture of this record is that unified pane of glass. Because no matter if I'm events or police, if I get it on day 1 or if I get it on day 30 and I'm scrambling to get this out the door, I can see everything that's happened right here if I've got permissions to. So we can start to build that single source of truth right here in the system. Right? Coming up real fast, just to walk through some of this business process that we've mocked up is for this particular stage, application received, it's just sort of a gut check. So I'm not, requiring too much to be captured at this point, but I did require this application reason. All right, so I'm the events person. I'm going to say this is a new application. And with that, I can go ahead and move it on to the next stage. Now, as you can imagine, this is, we can have workflow all over here as well. If I move it on to the next stage, does that trigger a notification to the customer again? Does that set certain things? For us, if I'm moving it to this next stage called first event team pass, I've set it so that we are making sure that the latitude and longitude are there. And this comes directly from simply having the address plugged in. So we can start to have the system take on things like that, right? When we talked about being able to plot these on a map, as soon as I have the address, show me the latitude and longitude. And as we'll see, this can extend to individual officers, right? As I attach or associate officers and I assign them a station, we can have that translated into latitude and longitude and start plotting those. But this is where, again, we want the system to take on that onus. Don't do it yourself. So one of the key things in here, too, was, and just from reading the events application, but right now, if I left everything as is, our next stage would be police team pass. But if I'm understanding correctly, one of the things is if there's more than 1,000 attendees, you guys need an events management plan, right? It's got to go through some other approvals, like fire department. You've got to have your plan written out. So I can go ahead and say, if this is a yes, and this might be something that you put on the forms that's automatic, but if this is a yes, it's going to go ahead and change the workflow. So we want this to dynamically reflect different things that are changing on your record. So now, okay, this needs to be over 1,000 attendees. Let's go ahead and do this new little stage that was shown to me, right? And so, of course, again, we can sort of influence that. Excuse me, right from clicking the form here. And mouse here. 1 second. Here. Let me reload the page. Sorry about that. There we go. So now I'm on the next particular stage here, which is the public safety and the management. And so for that one, I just mocked up a simple checkbox. Is the fire department approved? This is also sort of where, we talked about, of course, the automatic workflows.
Oh, Tom, it just replicated, so if you can, there.
Yeah. So right now we're on the next stage that popped up. Yep. So one of the things is, for the most part, you probably want automatic workflows like this, right, that generated the email. But there's also the ability, of course, to say, maybe I want all of my ducks in a row before I trigger something like that, before I send it out. So, of course, you can also run the workflow manually. I can say that at this stage, if I'm in my event management plan, I can go ahead and run my workflow and manually trigger this particular email for the fire stage. And now I can go ahead and have that kicked off manually. I mean, Automatic is good, but there's always going to be exceptions, right? So simply the concept of you decide, do you want it automatic, do you want it manual, do you want it mixed? That's fine. So again, if we reload this page right now, we'll be able to see that the we'll be able to see that the second email kicked off there, and you're always prepared. You can go ahead and scroll down and see that, all right, now, here's my first email, here's my second one, pending fire, right? And so now, of course, same concept, this is different. We're happy to inform you that the application is progressing. It's now in the special approval process with Seattle Fire. This is where we can start to have different templates. And this is an email, but you can imagine too, with the data that we have, we can start to put out reports, we can start to put out templates, so that again, if you get common information requests, you might have templates already created for those. It's simply click of the button, you can generate with the latest data and send that off.
Yeah, a couple other things that could be done from this as well is things like creating knowledge base for consistent responses to people who are, either calling in or emailing in, or maybe when you get to the point where you're interacting even electronically with folks. Additionally, if you want to, communicate some of this out onto your website, there's a way to, take that and consistently display it on the sites for those departments that are involved in the permitting process. Maybe it's the neighborhoods group who needs to or wants to communicate with outreach to the communities that will be impacted as a result of an event, some road closures, et cetera.
Or it could be a combination. There could be levels of that.
Multiples,
So you have
yeah.
neighborhood coordinators who want to see certain information. We could have a public portal where what we want to be transparent is open to everybody, so they can plan around it. There's that possibility too.
That's right. Yep. And real quick, since we're on the forum, is one of the key things is we want this to be easy to use. We also want it to be very concise, right? Because we answer this particular question, we know has it been produced before. We don't need the other fields around has it been produced before. But if it's yes, and this is the same concept for the web form, let's expose the fields. If we don't need it, let's keep it hidden. But if we need it, let's show it, right? We want that concise, consistent, efficient sort of form there. And to your point, Chris, is when we talk about the different perspectives, that's possible right within CRM, right? With me, sort of my default view, I'm seeing all of this data arrayed this way. We can quickly change it up to say, maybe if I'm a, coordinator or something, I want a different view. I want to see this information, but now I want to see a map alongside it, right? So we can start to change up this form very easily as well through configuration to say, what information do we care about? How do we want it arrayed? This particular one, actually, I would find useful if I was working here to say that, here's this particular event, but we can set this to look at maybe other events in the same weekend or in the same day or in the same hour filter so that we can quickly see where are my hotspots, where are all of these events taking place when, right? So this is, as we talk about sort of the officer allocation, et cetera, same concept. We can start to allocate and associate officers with this event, and we can start plotting them on a map if we have addresses for them to be stationed at or coordinates. So this is the kind of information where, again, it's in the system, and we can tell it what and how we want to see this to make it very easy for us, right? So, sort of, if I even want to change up the entire sort of UI and say, yeah, I want everything on a tab form. I want it to be very clean. I can now look at General tab, Details tab, Connections tab, and sort of hide everything else away. So that's where we definitely have the ability to really make this relevant to the information that we care about. Now, sort of the next thing that I wanted to talk about here was when we talk about, I'm going to come back to my default form here. One of the things that was very important, I think, in our conversations was, all right, let's say that we've got this particular event, and we're, maybe it's not yet approved, but we can start to look at officers' calendars, or we can start looking at possible allocations of officers, right? And we can start to look at that step. Well, what I could do is say, in my particular form here, tab form with connections, I have what we call connections. And this is where we can start to connect different officers, associate them. This is one way of doing it. There's many different ways, but this is a sort of an example of that. So what I can do is, let's say I've got some details around this particular event. What I could do, one way of doing it is I can go ahead and look up all my officers. What I've done is created in CRM a couple of officers, Officer 1 and Officer 2. So let me look at Officer 1 first. just to see it from a different perspective. Now we're out of that application, right? We're going to look at this officer and this officer's data that we have access to at least. So right now from this officer, I can see some profile information. But what I care about here is I can see the other events that he or she is connected to. So I can quickly see the different dates, the different stations they are. And of course, this is again where you can extend that to say, do you want latitude, longitude? Well, how much data do you want, right? This is where you can start to capture that. If, maybe not appropriate for here, but somewhere maybe in the back end is you could capture their pay rate. You can figure out that real pay rate at the end of the day. But this is where we can start to connect and make these associations. So what I can do right now, for example, is from this officer, let's just do a quick connection. And I'm going to go ahead and go in and look for that, that permit that we just did. And one thing I wanted to say is when we talk about sort of these associations, it doesn't necessarily have to be stuck with just permit, right? If, like you said, permits might be 10% of what they do, but you could have, witness protection, dignitary protection. Those could be different types of records, and you can associate this officer with all of those different types of records. And this is where we want the system to be flexible and account for all of that stuff that you guys are responsible for. So for us, though, because it is special event permit, let's go ahead and go in here and say, what's the last permit to be created? Here we go, 1058. That's us right there, right? Permit number 1039. So let's go ahead and add this officer and excuse me, associate him or her with this particular. And I'll put a Katie Corner to Starbucks. And what's the role? So this is, again, the kind of information that we can start to capture so that when we look at reports later on, we can see this officer was put in here as a traffic officer, kitty corner to Starbucks for maybe certain dates or times, and we can start to get that information right here. Right? So let's go ahead and just save this off. I'll put a start date in here and an end date. And we'll go ahead and save and close here. So of course now from the officer's perspective, from the officer's record, we can now see that that particular record is now associated. If we go back in, I'm going to pull down my little handy recent records here and look at that record that we had created, and we come to the connections tab. Well, here's that officer associated. Right? Easy as that. So as soon as we put this information in the system, as soon as we start to make these associations, we can see that information in its report. Now, immediately after making that association, if I want to pull a report, somebody's asking me how many officers are associated, I can immediately give them that information and not have to refer back to emails or Excel plans or whatever the case may be. So when we talk about sort of, a lot of the different things that we were doing with this particular record, right? We've covered things like workflow, automatic and manual workflow, conditional fields, information you want to capture, having the business flow, having the ability to associate different things. So that definitely is sort of the start of that conversation of, what all is it that you guys require for these events, and what can we sort of start helping with that. Let me pause there. That was sort of a lot of ground there. Any questions here in the room or on the phone?
Is there any way, if we do those assignments, to be able to do big dumps? Because if we have like a 800 officer event, that means we have to click it 800 times.
Gotcha. Yes, and so there's ways when we talk about association, Katie, you can help me out here, but I don't know if you heard the question. The question was, when we talk about sort of associating, right, that example that I did was where I went as the officer and I connected him or her to this particular event. And so the question was, can we do that in bulk? And so, for me, definitely in terms of, there's processes that we can run to say, yeah, I can flag these officers from this team are all going to be associated in bulk in the back end, to this particular event in mass. Katie, I don't know if you want to expand on that any further.
Yeah, sure. And that can be done not only, automatically through the backend, but through the user interface as well. So this is just one configuration option. You could also configure it so that it would allow you to select, from the event itself, multiple officers, and it could be based on query criteria. So you could say, show me all the officers that are assigned to a specific area, bring you back a list, and then you can bulk associate those to the event in this case, or whatever type of record it might be that you need to associate them to.
Okay. So you can bulk load that and then worry about the assignments, the individual block assignments later on, right? Get them in there, check their calendars, and then whoever's in charge of the event can assign it later on. But sure, yep, definitely do that. So as we sort of talk about the levels of data, what we've been working in here is the record itself. Now to drop that sort of one level higher, and we've already seen this, but coming back to look at all of my special events, there's a couple of key things here, right? When we talk about sort of looking at these records here, here's all the ones that have been submitted since, I don't know, last week when we created this instance. We can start to, of course, see the data here, and we can, as I mentioned, have different views. We can slice and dice differently, right? If I'm police or events, I can get different data. What we can also start to do is massage this data if I have the permissions with things that we're familiar with, like Excel. So, all right, if, let's say that, I don't know, a lot of these records you're missing a county, what we can do is simply go ahead and use what we're familiar with, like Excel Online, open it up in there, and we have the ability to, we can go ahead and have that same interface. So now let's go ahead and stretch. I know that these are all Seattle, so let's go ahead and plug in Seattle. But this is where we can quickly use these things that, I mean, everybody here, I think, and me included, uses Excel every day. And this is a great way to bulk update data in a familiar interface. And this is one of those examples where we can start to do this, and we can save the changes right to CRM, right? So let's use, again, what you're familiar with, and use the tools that are in place, and bulk update it, and now all of a sudden those records are now updated for you. So, we talked about Outlook, Excel, sort of these different points of integration that we have. And actually, if I pop open my Outlook, there's a couple of things. This is one of the test accounts that I have in this particular Outlook. So first of all, we saw the email come through that I had sent pending file, right? You might recall this, the one that I triggered. So we're happy to inform you that the application is progressing. What we can also do is start to say, when we talk about things like Outlook integration and making life easier, there's a couple of key points here. First is, if I just use Outlook for my email, I can do something as simple as track the emails. If I'm sending emails about a specific permit, about a specific case, about a specific constituent, I can have those emails tracked so that as I'm sending them through Outlook, they're automatically posted into CRM so that other folks can see that if I want to. The other method is I can use Outlook actually as a portal into CRM, right? What I have open here is sort of down here, you see the same sort of tiles that we saw in Dynamics, permits and licensing. Within permits and licensing, I can look at our special event permits. And I can actually pull up the data right from Outlook without even having to go into Dynamics. And so this is, again, people process tools. We want to make that very easy for the users to use. If you prefer to use Outlook and stay in Outlook, use this as your window into Dynamics to get the data there. Here's all of the permits that we just have. Including the newest one that we created, right? We can quickly see the information right from here, and maybe then we can use this to send an email. We can also double-click and have it open up a sort of window right into Dynamics so that we can, if we want to, massage the data from within Dynamics. But these are, again, sort of just examples of some of these points where we have this integrated so that you can very quickly access it from what you're familiar with. Let me pause there. Any questions on sort of integration or that piece, the Office, interoperability, things like that?
But this sounds like integration with me. Maybe it's... So, again, the special events process is predefined. Then there's some other processes that might be far less defined for police. Let's say a police officer or a group finds some intelligence that there's going to be a demonstration on a certain day. They don't know what to do with that information. It could be an officer on the street, or it could be our intelligence section that they want to input data to get other people thinking about it. Right now we have the phone and we have email.
Sure.
So if there was a portal, say for within a
do they have a mobile device, like typically a phone or something, a smartphone?
They may, but right now they have access to computers. But
okay.
There is talk about getting people phones in the future.
Okay. So they could, create a request similarly to what was done for the special, event permit. Only this would go directly to somebody on your team who
so it'd be rerouted.
Yep.
To, these people need to see it.
Yep. And depending on the nature, if you had different types of requests that were being made by the field officers, then the workflow could be triggered based on that specific request and who it needs to go to.
Possible criminal activity is a possible event activity, right? And that could then route to the different teams.
Yeah, the information might be timely, and maybe a phone call is appropriate, but it might also be it's next week Or it might be a captain that has a football game coming up where there's, say, rival teams, and it's gonna, they're advocating for, several squads to bolster patrol. They want us to be involved, and so I'm just thinking these other import sources, so that we still need approval from certain ranks for overtime. We still need to track overtime. We still need to track the event. There should be some sort of tracking for, okay. And so when you say interoperability, I'm thinking of, okay, does the precinct captain have some interoperability? How, because just, major groups.
You could give access
You
to
could give
every
access
single
to some-
one in the department across the city. I mean,
Wait
and
for
then
input.
depending on security roles, that would determine what information they would have access to.
I mean, would there be a way on that note, say, commanders have access to the dynamics through Outlook? They get a tip, they open that, they find the event, they open it, or if it's a certain date or time, something's going to happen, and then geographically it'll automatically update those events, say within a 10-block radius as a business rule.
Could be.
And then, the other user group that's real important is our chief, so they want to find out where in the process something is. Oh, I see that North Precinct has an event coming up that still doesn't have chief approval for 5 squads they want to bring in. It's that visual picture of.
Yep, exactly. And so, then to that, let's go ahead and drop back in here and look at some of this real fast. So on the dashboards that we saw, right, I mean, these are pretty high level, but, I think it'll sort of look at that concept is when we talk about piecing the data together, that's where the core stuff can come in. I mean, we want to stitch things from possibly multiple sources, not just events like we're focused on today, but like you're saying, right, if I'm chief, I want to see every single source that my officers could be working on. So now I can start to stitch together a report that shows me all of my situations, not just for events, but for all of this other stuff, and start to get that higher level data. I mean, even from looking at event stuff, this is the kind of, summation that we can start to do. Look at all of my records. Out of my events, how many have fees collected? How many have permits applied for? Where are the events taking place? We can definitely expand this to include all the different types of relevant information that we care about, right? And so, actually, I think on this other dashboard, just in terms of some other types of data, right, we can start looking at what connections we have. So now we're not talking about events at all. Now we're talking about general information. I want to look at Officer 1 and show me all the different things that Officer 1's connected to. This is now almost from like an officer or sergeant perspective, if you will, right, outside of events. If I'm sort of in neighborhoods, this is one of their asks is, what if I want to see related things like marketing lists or things like that? So it does not definitely have to be, focused on that one particular thing. Even if I'm in events, I can start to see, if I'm given permissions, I can start to see all these other things that might have some impact or that I need to see. So, did that help?
Yeah, I just think you saying that it can be done is helpful.
It's just customizable dashboards based on
right, exactly.
a data table.
Right. Yep.
And proprietary, however you want to put it together. You don't want NBC to see officer counts.
Exactly.
Right.
That would go to permissions.
And that's
exactly.
based on security.
Yep.
Role-based security. And then, the nice thing for the people that you work with that are, outside of IT, which many are, they can actually run their own reports. You don't have to do it for them. As long as they have access to the data, they can pull what they need to get the questions they need answered, and then do the work with their constituency, whether it be internal or external to the city.
And that's one of the keys to sort of, how this can be scalable across a lot of our existing customers is you can't pull in IT or a developer or something to do all this, right? That's why 80% of it is configurable. When we're talking about reports here, it's a wizard. I can step through the wizard and say, what fields do I want to put on here? What kind of chart do I want? And put it on my dashboard. That's all done with a few clicks. There's no coding. So that's one of those quick things where, if you're in the field, I don't know if officers really want to go ahead and, build out a dashboard, but they could, right? If you're at events and you need to see your data sliced different ways throughout the day or throughout the week or throughout the month, you can have different dashboards, different reports, you can build these within a few seconds and say, show me this data. And so as long as you have access to it, right, that's why sort of I started with that whole security thing. That's what controls it all. If you give them access to it, yeah, they can slice and dice this data any way they want.
This is all real time. So, the data that you have access to, is real decision-making data. Back, you get to keep the historical information. One of the things we heard was that a lot of what's applied to the events and what's needed is institutional knowledge. This would give you a historical count of what's been applied. You could capture any of the complaints. There's actually a survey capability within Dynamics. And I don't know what kind of outreach you're doing at all using social media. Is that something you're using? Are you using Twitter or Facebook or any of those types of?
So you have a public information officer's own dashboard or input.
And it could tie into the event. I mean, you could have, an event, sort of a widget on that particular event. Let's say it's the Seattle Marathon, and you capture the tweets relevant to the Seattle Marathon, right? And show it on that particular record. I think, neighborhoods actually, one of their asks was about the social integration. And so, right, I mean, from something like even capturing cases from social media. If some post on Facebook or Twitter referencing the city of Seattle, let's say, or neighborhoods or SPOC or SPD, says, I have a problem, and you can look for keywords or something, right? Have that automatically created as a case, and you can do outreach, and they'll be pleasantly surprised when they reply back and get a reply from you guys and say, here's this problem. But that's where, from that social perspective, I mean, that's all stuff that definitely can be. For those on the phone, I think it sounds like there's some neighborhood folks. On the social piece, just wanted to clarify too, is do you guys have any questions? But is that the sort of stuff that you guys were asking about?
As far as, well, for us, yes. So that sounds like some of the things that we are interested in. Not quite associated with Dynamics, but we've been looking into text analysis and how do we be able to synthesize information quickly that the city receives, as well as be able to kind of hear and understand what's going on in social media around concerns folks have.
Yeah, and we didn't actually build the social listening, the sentiment and into this, but there is a module for Dynamics that is available, and we can certainly show you that. And then from Dynamics, what that allows you to do is actually, with the engagement, be able to track those interactions and what that communication is out through, the different social channels like Twitter or Facebook.
Any other questions? Social, whatever. Nope. Okay. All right. So, and sort of, we're definitely getting to the place where we can definitely open it up. A couple of the different things is, since we do have neighborhoods on the phone, is we talked a little bit about sort of things like marketing lists or interests, and that was on your list, right? So again, the concept, I think you probably get it by now, but we can definitely start to capture the information, but also to have those associations. Just like we associated officers with events, as a simple example, and we have things like, let's say, marketing lists, right? And so here we have District A events as a marketing list. We can, of course, start to associate different things like campaigns or outreach to these particular marketing lists. So in this particular case, District A events, you have the standard information, you've got members of this particular list, and you can start to associate different things like campaigns. And when you look at those campaigns and their activities, we can roll them up and feed them back to your marketing list. And so you can start to keep track of at these different levels, right? You can start to see is, all right, from the macro, let me look at my marketing list and all these actions, or to the micro, let me focus on a campaign and only its actions. And when we talk about sort of, doing things and having Dynamics sort of be smart enough to help us with what we want to do, when we talk about, for example, members of a marketing list, we might have Dynamics go ahead and scan. Look at my constituent database, and see everybody that lives in this particular town or this particular neighborhood automatically and dynamically keep that updated to a certain marketing list so that I don't have to go in and add or remove people because, frankly, I don't have time for that, right? Let's have the system take on, again, that kind of overhead and that kind of onus and have it automatically manage it for you if you want. But this is sort of the kind of stuff that, whether it's events or marketing lists or officers, we can start to make these associations, and that's why it's CRM, right? Relationship management. I mean, that's the key here. We can very easily keep a repository of data in a database or an Excel spreadsheet, but it's a lot harder to keep tabs on those relationships, and that's what we care about. When we look at this data, what's related to what? That's that ultimate question that we have, right? So, from sort of the marketing list, let me ask the neighborhoods folks on the phone then, just curious, is this sort of the information that you were looking for? And B, any other sort of marketing or specific asks or requirements around that?
So for us, we're trying to figure out, so there's multiple mailing lists out there for departments have multiple, they're based on different projects, often in Excel spreadsheets, and so when we're trying to do an event around housing, and some of the other topics may be land use or maybe transportation, or they may be in a specific neighborhood, and we don't have a way to kind of target who is the information is getting pushed out to. We instead have to go to different folks and ask them for their lists. So the campaigns is something that we're really interested in, and seeing if we're then able to track who is coming to these meetings, and being able to send follow-ups to them, like, thank you for coming, this is what we heard, this is what the next steps are, and this is how you can continue to be engaged, so that we're creating this feedback loop between the city and community, and also being able to link folks, if they have questions, link them to the correct people.
Sure. Yep.
So in the police department, do you also have outreach or communications groups that might benefit from things like lists where they may be proactively looking to communicate with different types of audiences? Maybe it's media, maybe not media is maybe not the best one, but those types of things where you're tracking individuals within a group. And then managing communications.
Well, I mean, to speak on special events when people don't watch the news and here comes a marathon. Yeah, I mean, it's good to have that engagement from the public.
Right, so maybe proactively being able to loop in media individuals who are,
I think that
could
would
proactively be notifying.
Yeah, it sounds like the media portion would be important for SPD. I don't know how much direct outreach you do.
Well, I mean, the complaints, anything like that come from special events usually get directed to one person, which is usually the wrong person. So it's a matter of if it comes as a whole into the permit or into the event, then it can just be brought up as a whole for next year if they do it again.
Yeah, and I think, so speaking to the marketing and the outreach in advance, Department of Neighborhoods is really key.
Yeah.
Business services the business services team with OED is really key. Office of Emergency Management also has some great groups for the larger events, so here would be really helpful. Right now we do that, it's just very haphazard.
Right, and most government, organizations, they have, some kind of outreach function, right?
Yep.
Their goal is to communicate, right? So
Yeah, our DOT.
making that easier. I think, my point here is that, this is functionality that we're showing that may be more relevant for the neighborhoods group, but it's really applicable to most organizations. You may not call it a marketing list.
Can I ask who from neighborhoods is on the phone?
Pardon?
Who's on the phone with the neighborhoods? I missed who was there.
Samantha?
Oh, Samantha.
And then we've got Stacy Jellick, I think. Stacy, are you on as well? Good, but she's in the meeting room.
And sort of to that is, as as we start collecting this information, let's say neighborhoods maintains this marketing list or this list of folks for this particular neighborhood or area. I mean, that's where you can start to leverage that across your different teams, right? Yeah, again, if you need outreach, use their list. You know, you don't have to build your own. Use that, it's in there. If you've got a list of, and this may or may not be shared, but if you've got a list of constituents that you're building out, you may decide to leverage that for different teams and have that as part of the piece, right? So that's where we can definitely leverage the information.
Yeah. And it's really to help ease concern around community. Sometimes they are frustrated if they're like, well, I've signed up for your list before. Why didn't I know about this meeting? And again, it's like trying to move away from that project by project and moving to like broader topic areas.
Do you have something set up where you could show Yammer in the collaboration? I know that didn't come up. I don't know if you've got it.
I'm not sure in this particular environment that we have.
Yeah, so it wouldn't be in this demo, but what the way that looks is, let's say you had it might be on a campaign, it might be on one of the special event records where you have that, and if you want to pull one of those up, Tom, but if you have like the notes, activities, that section, there's another tab in there for our Yammer integration so that you could carry on internal conversations, and those users don't necessarily need to be licensed or access the CRM component of it. You can post from within CRM, and people that are on the network can post back with files or comments and collaboration through that means. So it would show up like right next to OneNote there and just be another tab where you can view, either it's a dedicated special event group or maybe a group that's specific to this specific event and not special events overall. So you could leverage the group functionality, the members of the group, and kind of collaborate and mind share without them having to actually access a CRM application.
So this may be a really silly question, but as far as people that would be able to see this different workflow, we're thinking on the outreach and engagement standpoint that we could have people tied in outside of the Department of Neighborhoods, but have people tied in to the system that are with multiple departments, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yep, so basically you can give someone access, you define what their role is within the application, which will drive which records they have access to and whether they're allowed to, maybe just see those records or edit them or create new ones. So it's all configurable security. Even down to the field level. You could lock, if you were capturing, I don't know, like credit card numbers or, personally identifiable information, you can lock those fields out to certain profiles as well.
Great. And I had another question too. So I saw the map, which is really fantastic. It's great to see those pins in where different events are taking place. Is it also possible to have that populate into a calendar?
Yep. So there's synchronization with Exchange, Outlook. So when these events are created, they can create, like an appointment that could block. They can show up within, there's also a calendar right within the application as well that you could view to see kind of overall status. But if you wanted it to synchronize to maybe the people that are involved in the events calendaring, you can configure that as well.
So it sounds like there are options about whether you show that something's in process or whether something's finalized and whether that populates on the calendar, correct?
Yeah, you can do that as well. So you could have like a trigger that would, once it's in a particular stage, it could then trigger, an appointment that synchronizes to a calendar event. Yep.
And would the synchronization, stumbling over my words, would that be possible or does that integrate into SharePoint online?
So CRM does, I don't think we showed it yet, but CRM does have a native integration to SharePoint.
Okay.
It's more
I figured
from
Microsoft,
but I just... Yeah, it's more from the perspective of document management.
Okay.
But you could extend that functionality. That might be, borderline in the like 10% customization if you wanted it to automatically generate, tasks and activities within SharePoint. It's definitely a possibility. A lot of times we start seeing, once people start using CRM more and more, SharePoint is more from the document management, a little bit of collaboration and task lists, but a lot of that management calendaring tends to start occurring within Dynamics and Outlook or Exchange.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're just thinking of as this builds and folks may or may not have access, trying to create opportunities for them to see some of the collaborative work outside of Dynamics.
Yep, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
And the SharePoint too, I mean, you had mentioned earlier you guys have SharePoint, but not necessarily using it. And I think, part of a lot of what we see is SharePoint's generally unstructured data, if you will, right? You start putting folders all over, you can quickly get sort of unstructured there. And so if we're talking about sort of using Dynamics but having it leverage SharePoint, it can start creating those folders for you. So as I have my events, as I have my groups, let's have that orderly structure, and you don't even have to worry about that. So that's one of the benefits of having sort of, again, it's the same family of products, and have that be able to sort of carry over. And now, it's going to create the families, create the hierarchy, and you guys can see the documents pretty clearly there. The reason I brought this up real quick was, we talked a lot about sort of from the different perspectives, right? What we saw before was me as an admin seeing all the different permits. But just real quick, and I spoke to this earlier, but of course, if I'm logged in here, it's called a police person, but I can simply have a view that shows me only the things that I'm assigned to, right? Right now, these are the permits that are in a stage where it's assigned to me, and it's going to show up on this view. That's all I have to care about, right? Let me focus, whether it's permits, or maybe I have a view that pulls in, permits, details, security, whatever. But this is where we can start to draw, we can start to slice and dice that data like we care about. So like in this example, all I've got to worry about for myself is these 5 events, because it's the only ones I'm attached to. I don't have to worry about the other 45 that we have in the system. So, coming back to sort of that ease of use and that people process tool there. So, any other questions? We can go ahead and open it up for questions or any deep dive or anything that you guys have questions on.
Can you bring up that view of the CRM, the one where we're going through the workflow?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So, the police team, can you create a subset of workflow from that that isn't? Obviously we have our process, special events has theirs.
Yeah, exactly.
Can we, by the time it hits us, it's not just one tab, it's our independent workflow.
Yep.
That, of course, through permissions and securities.
Right.
Who gets to see it and then.
Right.
And then triggers back, send back for more information, or we can pass it on at that point.
We call that sort of branching. It's almost, sort of akin to this, where different things, for example, like, when I selected this, or when I selected the attendee plan required, it triggered sort of extra stages, same thing. Yeah. If it goes to police, events doesn't even know about the 20 different things you guys have to do. Let's just show that to the police team. And when you guys finish it, like you said, let's put it back in the main queue, main stage, and have it continue on. Exactly.
And then we can create our own display, our own data sets that we need just internally within that branch.
That's right. Yeah. So, and sort of, similar to this, it's just almost like a field, but for this, for example, we see different stages. I put different fields here, right? Now, granted, something like a latitude or longitude, I probably want to put down in form because everybody has to see. But yeah, exactly. You could lock it down so that, in these different stages, once I'm done as the events team, once I'm done and it's moved past my stage, there's maybe 40 other fields that open up for the police team, and they can see it, but I don't need to worry about it. Exactly.
And I can see that the SPD is working on it.
That's right. Yeah. By different things, right? By stage, because it's in police, by last action. There's many different things, exactly. And if you do want to open it up, right, maybe it does behoove you, because if I'm part of the police team, I may well want to go back and see some of these other pieces of data that were collected. So I can, if I have the permissions again, to come back here and see what were these checkboxes, what were these latitude, longitudes, et cetera.
And then within our workflow, if, police team is one set, but we have our branch and then our workflow, but our workflow will be driven to other people for their workflow within just our division.
Sure.
So then, with that said, we have the capabilities of setting time hacks, deadlines,
right,
notifications.
Right.
Hey, you're coming to 5 days before this thing is due.
Right. Exactly.
So, one of the goals in showing you this demonstration today was to show an application that can serve the needs of multiple different departments, but meet the very specific needs of each of those departments. And I know we weren't able to go into deep detail, but hopefully we accomplished showing you some of what's possible. I think the real work goes into defining what your process is, and then looking at it on a whole, and architecting the solution that meets, the majority of needs, focusing on using out-of-the-box capabilities, integrating with the systems you need, but get yourselves up and automated, so you're not having to manage these spreadsheets, trigger the emails yourselves, assign the resources, track the map, the calendar, do all the updates, and then pass it on to somebody else in the process. I think, by automating, I think you said today it's a 30-day process, at least that's the window you have. I think you could significantly reduce that, as well as do the reporting to ensure that, I know in the case of the police department, you're interested in ensuring that, the resources that are assigned or allocated to these events are also, paid for and collected as part of the permitting process.
Well, I have a bunch of questions. If it's
Of
okay.
course.
Is it a good time to start on that? But before asking the questions, what excites me about this is it looks like it's really twofold, which serves many purposes that we're trying to improve on. First is it's a easy and handsome way for a client to come in and navigate a really complicated process. One of the goals, we talked about legislation earlier, one of the goals that we have is to create a dashboard and create something that anyone, whether you've done it before or not, can just automatically go through it if you have access to the computer. We would, of course, provide that. So that's the first piece. The second is that, like I said earlier, we're really in the dark ages with facts, PDFs, and handwritten versus non-handwritten. Over the past 2 years, we've been really trying to, special events and Spot also, been really trying to lean everything, get as few touches on everything, as few emails, and this looks like it really will save tons and tons of admin time and just kind of processing time. And the other piece is just that access and immediate knowledge of all of the many departments that have their eyes and their hands on this. So I guess the last piece is that, like you said, I own a Mac at home. I work on PC at the office. And I do agree that there is benefit to having the continuity of the system, so you're using Office Suite. So, but can I dive into a couple questions here that may or may not be too much in the weeds? So going back to the documents, a couple questions about the documents that are shared by the clients and then maybe shared by either the Special Events Office or one of the departments that are reviewing. If fire says you need to fill out this document, they can put that onto a response to the client within CRM, right? So they can, there's an automated response and they can use that as a portal. Okay. And we can choose whether that's public to the committee that's looking or whether that's proprietary. We can choose who gets to see that by setting the permissions and preferences. Is that right?
When we're talking about by committee, are we talking about the internal events committee? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, the special events committee is many city departments, some county and some state departments, and sometimes like chambers or citizen representatives.
Okay. So
it's a body. It's an unusual body of reviewers, but all will have access to some extent on this. And my question is just if a department needs to have a specific thing delivered to the client, can we choose through the system whether that's everybody sees that happening or just the client does?
So Katie, maybe for this question, it's around security, and I think the level of security and the complexity that can create, and what makes sense where to share things like a communication that one department sends out to a customer, and they don't necessarily want to share that or make that available for everyone to see.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, I switched headsets here. So you can configure. So let's say would a fair use case be one department sent an email out and it had a document attached, and you don't want the users of the other department to be able to see that went out?
Or they don't need to. It's just, they don't want to see.
Yeah. So you can configure that. So at the the various record types level, you can say who has permission to see that. So if you had the system configured such that you had your different departments set up, you could then say, this group of users is only allowed to see, activities that are owned by someone within their department, and they can't see other departments. Or maybe they can, see all records from all departments, but they can only edit those from their department or that are assigned to them. You have the ability to do that at, all the various record levels, or the record type level, and down to attachments.